Welcome back, Run Your Mouth podcast. I'm back in the apartment, but go check out the Shedcast. We totally Shedcasted. It is reopened for business. Maybe we'll have a non-reopening opening ceremony with a ribbon. We were thinking about just throwing more ribbon cutting ceremonies, just showing up to places with ribbons. You know, gas stations been open for the last 10 years. Just throw more ribbon cutting ceremonies. It's a good time. You throw up the ribbon, you get the big thing of scissors. You get women to dress up real slutty and hot. You get your dick sucked afterwards. There's never been a guy at a ribbon cutting ceremony ever. If you go there and you're the guy who cuts the scissors, you get that big honor. You're getting your dick sucked. So that's going to be my strategy once the world reopens in 2022 or something. When, you know, we're going to find out that these vaccines don't really work, and then we're going to shut down again. But sometime in 2023, when everyone else is kind of sick of the dating apps, I'm going to start a business where I just keep throwing ribbon cutting ceremonies. And I'm going to get so much puss. It's going to be a great time. But anyways, let's start our episode. Sponsors. Yeah, that's a good thing to shout out right at the top while we got this celebration going, while we're talking about ribbon cutting ceremonies. Firstly, Run Your Mouth Coffee. They got some delicious coffee. They got some exotic flavors, like things that have been, made in bourbon baskets, and they're supporting free speech episodes like this. Same as my other sponsors. They're into free speech. That's why they're involved in this. You got Sheath Underwear, promo code RYM. You get 20% off. And then, of course, Yokratom, home of the $60 kilos. Now, before we get into the news, I've got a tragic tale I'd like to share with you guys, which is on Friday. Sad to report, I had a bad sandwich. I really, I woke up late after the Shedcast. I was too tired to make myself breakfast, and I just decided that's it. I'm going to go to the deli down the street. I'm missing New York City. Suburb food, it's so inconvenient. I'm just better off cooking. There aren't enough good deli options. I got one place that's solid for lunch, but they're not open late, and breakfast isn't great because they don't really do bagels. But anyways, I don't have to complain all about suburb sandwiches. You guys are living in the suburbs too. Maybe you've never really experienced New York City. New York City should just call itself the sandwich capital of the world, because any hour of the day you can get yourself something solid. You don't need I spend more money now cooking my own food, which isn't as good. This is no way to live. Get comedy in New York City reopened, not because I liked living there, nor did I like Rent, but sandwiches, the sandwich situation in New York City was excellent. Anyways, I wake up in the morning and I decide for some reason I'm craving roast beef. I was going to get just, roast beef on rye, lettuce, onion, tomato, mustard. Simple sandwich. So I go there and I get myself my sandwich. I get myself some oatmeal raisin cookies and a seltzer. And sometimes once I'm in the car, I like sitting in the car eating lunch as if I really earned it, like as if I'm on the job site and I was working real hard all morning and now I finally get to my lunch. Because sometimes if I just come back to my apartment, it doesn't really feel like a ceremony. It doesn't feel like a good time. But if I pull up to, a random parking lot and I sit in there and I eat my sandwich, it feels like I've been working all morning and I really earned this thing. And then what I like to do is I'll line up something very specific, like a podcast that I want to listen to. And that's a nice time. I get to sit in my car, pretend like I'm working hard, like I'm just taking my simple first lunch break for the day. I eat, well, in this case, it was kind of early lunch, late breakfast. Let's not get lost in these details. And I was hungry. I'm excited for the sandwich. I've got my whole setup going. The ritual's here. I'm living for this moment. And then I open up my sandwich, and at first I thought she put Russian dressing on it, and I don't normally I'm good with Russian dressing. It's okay. It's not the mustard I was looking for, but Russian dressing's acceptable. Except it wasn't Russian dressing. It was Russian dressing should be ketchup and mayo essentially, and there are variations on that. You can spice it up with some hot sauce. You can put other spices in it. It's good. I'm not coming out as anti-mayo. I get why people eat mayo. It's not my preferred condiment. I've kind of moved past it. I find it gives me some stinky farts. And what the fuck is mayo? It's just like this white goo. It's like a big old puddle of jizz that's been turned into jello or something. I don't know. It just kind of creeps me out. What can I say? You age a little bit, you lose your hair, and you start realizing life has consequences, and everything makes you nervous. I hope that doesn't happen to you and you continue to eat creamy mayo and have delicious sandwiches for the rest of your life. I've mostly moved past Russian dressing. It's no longer my preferred condiment. Sure, are there times when it's acceptable? Are there times that if it ended up on my sandwich, I didn't order it? Am I kind of excited that it's there? All of those things are accurate and true. But in this particular case, I open it up, and it's not just like traditional Russian dressing. It's like the Russian dressing you'd put on a salad. It's almost like Thousand Island dressing. And so I take the first bite. I try and ignore it. take the second bite, still trying to ignore it. Then I try and like scrape it off. I take the third and I'm just like, this is fucking disgusting, right? Now I got a problem where I can't go back to return, 3 bites into one half a sandwich. Firstly, I don't even think I'd return a sandwich as it is. But now you got a double problem when you don't want to return a sandwich. One is now you can't go back to that place and get yourself breakfast because you're not going to go back and just order a second sandwich like you're the world's. Maybe in New York City where there's so many people that you're just anonymous. I mean, these people just know me because they probably get 4 customers in the morning. I'm making their profit margins when I actually go there and get breakfast. So you don't want to be a fat fuck and they know you as second sandwich in the morning guy. And then you also, I feel bad about them feeling bad for fucking up my sandwich. Maybe that's something I got to work on within myself. And so I had to go to another spot to get myself, a worser breakfast, which wasn't even what I was looking for. And so I leave it for you guys. What is your returning sandwich policy? I'm curious to know if they mess it up. Are you going back to a place to return your order? That's where delivery business, that's where that's even worse. But that's almost easier. It's almost easier if they mess up your delivery to call them and say they messed up the delivery and then that guy's got to deal with it and he doesn't get the second tip and you're being more of a dick. But when you actually went there to pick it up and then you come back and then you got to go back there again. Like even when I'm in a restaurant, I rarely send people back. And I'm curious, you guys tell me, what's the etiquette? How do you guys handle the situation? robsnewsroom@gmail.com. I'd actually like to start a service in general for, it'd be a service for non-confident people. It's almost like a therapist, but it's just like a what's the etiquette? And they just answer quick questions where every time you're in a life situation, you can't tell if you're being a jerk for being upset about this, or if it's the other person's fault. It's like a consultant. What's the etiquette consultant? You call them up, they give you an answer, and then you hang up the phone, and then you can tell people to go fuck themselves with confidence because your etiquette consultant. Wouldn't it be great if the guy on the other end was like, that would almost be the sketch of this. It's like a mafia guy and you keep getting your ass kicked because, he's telling you to tell everyone to go fuck themselves. All right, that's enough of this. Let's get into the news. First news story I wanted to highlight. I just thought that this one was so hilariously backwards. There was a New York Post news story about beach volleyball players, and they're going out to Qatar. I don't know how that's pronounced. Qatar. I think it's Qatar. No, there's no way that's right. I should start. Maybe my etiquette consultant can also tell me how to actually read. So I guess this is how much of a dumb prude I am. But I was once wondering, I think I might have brought this up on this podcast. Perhaps I brought it up on the Shedcast, but I think beach volleyball is probably a difficult sport to play. And when you turn into it, it's almost incredible how every one of these chicks is like got a pretty sporty and amazingly good looking body. And they're all there with their bikinis. And I was always wondering, like, how come you never see a person with a Babe Ruth type build who's a chick who's kind of like, maybe it's a sport where you got to kind of be real tall in order to get over the net and spike it. But I would think like you might have some really strong chick with like a Rashiki type build who doesn't want to be out there in her thong. And it's weird to me that a requirement of playing a sport would, like, I get it. Like, even if you're swimming, you're not really wearing, like, if you go to the Olympics, I don't think they're wearing thongs. I think they're probably wearing their bathing suits. There's porn on the internet, so I don't really have to watch these things. So I'm not totally up to date on this. So anyways, I would have thought that it's demoralizing, or maybe not demoralizing, but if you were required to wear that as a uniform to play beach volleyball, that would seem backwards to me because perhaps you wouldn't want to have to wear that. So they're going out to Qatar. Let's just go with Qatar because that's clearly not the right way to pronounce that. So they're going out to Qatar. They're going to go out to Qatar. And here were 2 quotes from the article. It's not about whether we have more or less clothing on. It's about the fact that we are not being allowed to wear our work clothes to do our job. Here was another quote. We are there to do our job, but are being prevented from wearing our work clothes. It's their work clothes. It's like a complete and total hazard to wear anything where their ass cheeks aren't exposed. Like if you're going to put these ladies on the job site without the proper equipment, they work hard on their ass. And I don't care if I'm playing in front of Jesus Christ himself. I've worked for these buns and I'm going to have them out there. It's almost like in a biathlon, you'd be like, I don't get it. Well, why you shouldn't? It's part of the sport. If you want to be a part of the sport, you got to have those butt cheeks spread, hanging out. It doesn't matter if you've gone to a religious country, you've worked for your right to show up to work in a thong and by God, you're going to do it. there's just something backwards. Like, I would just think you go there, and so you wear booty shorts instead. Booty shorts are erotic too. You know, you wear quarter-sanctioned booty sports. On the same note, I'm not coming out as anti-thong, nor am I trying to say, I don't know, it gets confusing. It gets confusing what you're allowed to comment on. News article about Donald Trump in CNN, and it was saying that now he's typically spending his mornings on nearby golf courses, making and taking calls from a golf cart that doubles as his mobile and self-driven office. Wouldn't it be great if he just did the entire presidency that way? I hope he runs again, he wins, and instead of going to the Oval Office, just his whole day, and we can get constant news coverage of it. It's just him taking calls from his golf cart. And, you know, and then that puts you, like, from a negotiating standpoint, that kind of puts you on the weak leg where he's able to answer his phone. He's like, "Are you breaking up my game? You okay? I'm playing the best game. What do you need? Okay. What do you need?" Just, or maybe like he only works the 4 hours while he's playing golf. I've never been into golf, but it seems that I guess important decisions are made on the golf course. I don't know. I would think if I were to play golf, it would be more to chomp on the cigar, have beers, and I would want to play golf without having, I guess, the competitive element, because I don't actually know how to play the sport. So just to kind of be there for the hang. Almost like the retarded kid. I'm basically describing I'd like to be, I don't know if you're allowed to use that, right? Look, goof, is that better? Your dumb cousin. I want to be the dumb cousin who just gets to tag along for the ride. And I get to go like sit in the golf cart, like, this is fun. And then you hit some balls, you drink some beers, you chomp on cigars, and, you're not actually on the scorecard because you don't know how to play the game. Governor Cuomo, he's in the news now, in trouble again, not just for killing old people. That was Act 1. Now we're in Act 2. Apparently he's harassing people sexually, sexual harassment. And as far as sexual harassment goes, I mean, obviously you shouldn't do it, but at least he's got good taste. You know, if you're going to make a stab at someone at work, this was the right lady. Not that you should do that. Obviously, don't sexually harass people, but you got to give people credit, at least that they're sexually harassing people that are, well, I don't think you could say worth sexually harassing, because now that's back in the creepy camp. But I guess I'm just saying kudos on having good taste, but don't sexually harass. And also, apparently the way he sexually harassed was he tried playing strip poker, which, when does that ever work? I'd love to meet these people whose penises are so nice that they're like, if I just show it to this lady, she's going to want it. She might not like me as a human person. She might not like the way I look with clothes on, but if I can just, does that work? Maybe I'm confused. Maybe I just think that if a lady got naked, I would be like, all right, well, I guess we're doing this because I'm a man and that turns me on. And maybe women are the same way. Maybe if Cuomo got naked, and even though he's 65, pushing 70, maybe he still has a pretty nice body. Maybe because of gravity, he's like one of these old guys in the locker room. That wiener's really just, drooping down towards the floor, looks extra long. It's misleading. You think, hey, that's going to be big and a good time. But what you don't know is there's no way it's going north. There's no way he's getting that equipment working. That's the best it's going to look, is when it's just pointing south because gravity's kicked in, because he's old and he's probably got long. You think he's got longer type? I bet he's got firm fucking tight balls. Like when you're a hard ass like that, I bet like they're big, but I don't think they're droopy. I think he's probably got some hard nuts. But this lady reported back, and this is kind of the, I guess, vicious circle of sexual harassment. But let's just read this. In October 2017, Miss Boylan wrote, the governor joked that they should play strip poker while on a flight back from an event in Western New York. The two were in close quarters, sitting across from one another on the plane, with a press aide and state troopers sitting nearby. Miss Boylan said she replied, I guess this is after he said, hey, let's play strip poker. That's exactly what I was thinking, in a sarcastic manner. She tried to play it cool. The actual quote, I tried to play it cool. She wrote in an essay. The problem with that is, like, just that little bit can give a guy hope for the next 7 years. Like, you can say point blank to him after that, like, I'm not interested in you. This is sexual harassment. Please stop coming on to me and work. But in the back, they're like, well, there was that one time, I made that sexual harassment comment. I mean, I made that poker comment. She didn't say no. I think she's pretty into it. I think if I can just talk her into seeing me naked, this will be in go mode. That's a tough situation. How much longer can Cuomo last between these claims of sexual harassment, between killing old people, between this unbalanced budget, between New York City going to shit, which you might be able to blame de Blasio for that more than Cuomo, because powerful people go down. That Sheldon Silver guy, I think that was his name, who was in Senate, and he was diverting all this stuff to his law firm, getting paid the big bucks. He got taken down, so it's possible to take these people down. I wonder if he's going to survive into the next term. If this guy is so powerful, and his brother at CNN can cover his tracks, and they can keep this dynasty going. Or maybe it's the end and his daughter can finally go get banged out by that state trooper. Maybe that could be the happy ending. It'll be like the Shakespeare of our lives. All right. And now I'd like to play a couple of YouTube videos, but before I do, it's a reminder to go get yourself some sheath underwear. You might not be able to handle these videos that I'm about to play. If you're just wearing regular boxers right now and your stuff's just hanging out there in the wind, flopping all over the place, I don't know if you're going to be able to handle the intellectual wisdom and knowledge I'm about to bring to you when I break down some videos. But if you got sheath, you can separate your dick from your balls. Most comfortable underwear, especially if you're out there working out or you're doing like winter activities where you need something that's going to wick away the sweat. So go to sheathunderwear.com, promo code RYM, going to get yourself, I think it's 20% off. And then always, Yokratom, home of the $60 kilo. At this point, you've heard about Kratom enough that, just pick some up. Pick up a kilo just because it's fun. Just put it on your shelf. It's a conversation starter. Maybe you'll dip it. Maybe there'll come a time where you'll just be happy if you're over the age of 21. You'll just be happy that you got that Kratom on hand. And if you're thinking about picking up some Kratom, no reason to get it from any place other than Yokratom, home of the $60 kilo. All right, now let's get into these videos. The first is Merick Garland. So he was Obama's pick to be in the Supreme Court. Got held up by Mitch McConnell, never even got it voted on. Now he's making a comeback. He's taking Bill Barr's job. Well, it's not Bill Barr's job, but it's the post. It was the post that Bill Barr was holding. I think it's the head AG. And so let's listen to Josh Hawley asking Merick Garland about, some of his plans for while he's going to be in.
Do you believe that illegal entry at America's border should remain a crime?
Well, I haven't thought about that question. I just haven't thought about that question. I think, the president has made clear that we are a country with the borders and with a concern about national security. I don't know of a proposal to decriminalize but still make it unlawful to enter. I just don't know the answer to that question. I haven't thought about it.
Wouldn't you love to be able to take a job interview this way? Just go, listen, I don't have any experience with the requirements for this job, so I can't give you an answer on how I might handle any of the issues that come up because, I just haven't really considered any of the requirements or things that might arise during this job. So as you start asking me the questions of how I might handle those situations, I really don't have an answer for you. All right. Now, here was another senator who is grilling Merick Garland. And he's grilling him on what institutional racism is. Now, sadly, the guy who is grilling him just seems like a villainous racist, but, the looks can be deceiving. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but he just looks like he's right out of a old stuff. So you telling me that we ain't going to be allowed to run our fields? All right, here, let's listen to a little bit. This is Senator John Kennedy.
You and I are about the same age, I think.
I think so. That's right, Senator.
What is, when you refer to systemic racism, what is that?
I think it is plain to me that there is discrimination and widespread disparate treatment of communities of color and other ethnic minorities in this country. They have a disproportionately lower employment, disproportionately lower homeownership rates, disproportionately lower ability to accumulate wealth.
Can I stop you because this 5 minutes goes so fast?
I'm sorry.
So you're basically saying there's a disparate impact.
There's disparate impact, which in some cases is the consequence of historical patterns. Sometimes is the consequence of
let me ask
unconscious bias and some kind conscious.
When you were at the Department of Justice,
yes,
was the Department of Justice then systemically racist?
I think we look for a pattern or practice in each institution. When you talk about a specific institution, you look for its pattern and practices.
How do you know what you know? In other words, you say an institution is systemically racist.
I didn't say any particular institution.
I know. I'm not saying you did.
All right. So here's where I'm going to start offering a little bit of commentary. How do we enact something in law or make laws around something that we don't have a clear definition for, and there is no clear standard by which to say this does or does not exist? I don't know. Example on the top of my head is, let's say I'm breathing fine in my room right now. If the Department of Health said that the oxygen standards are not good in this room, well, do you have a meter? Do you have something by which we can say that there aren't the oxygen levels in here are low? I would just like, if you're going to enact a law that we have to correct for something, there must be some sort of a way to gauge for it to say that we've fixed it or we haven't fixed it. And there must be some sort of a clear definition by which to say, here's the thing that we need to correct for. Otherwise, how do you ever correct for it? Or how do you even, establish that it exists? All right. And then one more video I want to play. I hope you guys are, I'm finding this fascinating because this is kind of I guess the biggest names in the business debating things that are now being brought into government to be actually like put into law. And it's interesting to me that we're enacting laws on things that are not just kind of flatly known. It's like wishy-washy gray information area that's being preached to us as if it's absolutes and we need to enact laws upon. And so on that note, here's another video from last week where Rand Paul is talking to Dr. Levine.
Like surgical mutilation, hormonal interruption of puberty can permanently alter and prevent secondary sexual characteristics. The American College of Pediatricians reports that 80 to 95% of prepubertal children with gender dysphoria will experience resolution by late adolescence if not exposed to medical intervention and social affirmation. Dr. Levine, do you believe that minors are capable of making such a life-changing decision as changing one's sex?
Well, Senator, thank you for your interest in this question. Transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field with robust research and standards of care that have been developed. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of Health, I would look forward to working with you and your office and coming to your office and discussing the particulars of the standards of care for transgender medicine.
All right, so she doesn't answer the question, and here is we're going into deep waters here, but I've already said enough things that you're not allowed to have a career. So what does it matter? I think what people put forward when it comes to being transgender is that you're born into the wrong body, and you know that, and so you are able to correct for that and live a better life, and everyone should accept you for that, which is fine. If you're an adult and you're allowed to make any choice you want in life, and if that choice is going to make you happier, go live your better and happier life. No one, who is arguing against that? Go live a better life. Go identify as the other sex. That's fine. The problem, I think, that is somewhat coming from that is that apparently there are some people who are miserable, and because they're being told that it could be that they're miserable because they were born into the wrong gender, they attach to that idea for a period of time, and then they realize, oh, that's not actually solving my problem of the way that I'm feeling miserable. Maybe that wasn't the solution. And Rand Paul is putting forward that I guess there are a lot of children who at one point in time, I guess, attached to this idea that they were of an opposite gender and then later grew out of feeling that way. And so if at that young age they had been given permanent things, they might not ever be able to. In other words, this is a conversation for how people can actually live out their best lives. And if allowing children to make these decisions is actually a good idea, especially as it does not seem to be a black and white thing that people who identify that is a permanent thing. It seems that some people are, I guess from what I'm hearing here, some people are miserable, and so they're attaching to the idea that they can correct for that misery by changing genders because they think that, but in other words, it's not a clear-cut thing that everybody who I guess at some point in time comes to the conclusion that they were born into the wrong gender seems to, I guess, stick with that idea, or that they actually feel that way as much as they're trying to dodge some sort of a personal misery. And coming back to the same thing, that if you're now chief doctor for the country, addressing this problem, shouldn't there be some sort of a clear standard? Like, shouldn't it be, and isn't there a way that we can run the data science on how many, like, it seems like Rand Paul's got a pretty good number there to say that there's a lot of people that don't actually, I guess, identify with having been born into the wrong gender in a permanent way. And the other factor that's interesting about this, I mean, I believe Owen Benjamin really got in trouble for speaking out against, is that it's a conversation that we're trying to go, hey, can we evaluate this to ensure that we're making the best decision for children? And the fact that when it seems to me like the science here is in gray area, where there is not some sort of a clear-cut standard, there should be at least the opening to have a conversation about whether or not that this is the best approach. Now, to take a step back, I mean, if you're the parent of a child who, this is your choice to make. This is not my choice to make for you. I don't think anyone should tell you that, like, if there's a doctor who wants to prescribe this, there's a drug company that wants to make it. You want to, like, I don't think that there should be a law that prevents you from doing that. But perhaps it's not something that we want to encourage, and we can at least educate people to the fact that sometimes if it is true that there are a lot of children who feel this way temporarily, and it would be, by an objective standard, a mistake to give them medications that will make a permanent change that they won't be able to undo, that they might not themselves want, we should at least be having that conversation, and we should at least be allowed to have debate around it. And by the way, I saw, because these questions are both at least reasonable questions, and the fact that Dr. Levine just dodges it and says, I'm willing to come to your office and have a conversation, is not, I think, a good look for, hey, science is on my side, or I have really good evidence or objective truth on my side. But even so, Dr. Rand Paul was trashed by the Washington Post, like, trash. They were saying, hey, he's a doctor, but he's an optometrist. And also, here's everything that's wrong about him asking these questions. And I think it should at least be fair to have a conversation about whether or not this is a good idea for kids. And also, once again, similar to what I was saying with at least the way Merick Garland's explaining systemic racism, this should not be gray area stuff. If we're going to enact laws around it, these things should be pretty clearly defined and backed up by evidence.
The specific question was about minors. Let's be a little more specific, since you evaded the question. Do you support the government intervening to override the parent's consent to give a child puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and/or amputation surgery of breasts and genitalia? You have said that you're willing to accelerate the protocols for street kids. I'm alarmed that poor kids with no parents who are homeless and distraught, you would just go through this and allow that to happen to a minor.
All right, this might be a bad joke to make, but as I'm listening to it, there's something a little bit humorous. If we're talking about putting government resources into allowing someone to augment their body, right? If you're dealing with a homeless person, there's something really funny to me about investing a lot of money into changing their body for them to then just go back outside and be homeless. I would think if we're going to make a monetary investment into this person living a better life, maybe we should take care of the homeless and other problems first, and then that thing second. Because, like, if you got to go to the bathroom outdoors, it doesn't matter what. I mean, maybe that's just not. This is a problem with these topics. Is I don't even know the logic behind it, or in what way you're are or not allowed to poke fun, which is not even something you should be concerned about. All right, let's just listen to a little more.
I would hope that you would have compassion for Kira Bell, who's a 23-year-old girl who was confused with her identity. At 14, she read on the internet about something about transsexual. She thought, well, maybe that's what I am. She ended up getting these puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones. She had her breasts amputated. But here's what ultimately she says now. And this is a very insightful decision from someone who made a mistake but was led to believe this was a good thing by the medical community. I made a brash decision as a teenager, as a lot of teenagers do, trying to find confidence and happiness Except now the rest of my life will be negatively affected, she said, adding that the medicalized gender transitioning was a very temporary, superficial fix for a very complex identity issue. What I'm alarmed at is that you're not willing to say absolutely minors shouldn't be making decisions to amputate their breast or to amputate their genitalia. For most of our history, we have believed that minors don't have full rights and that parents need to be involved. So I'm alarmed that you won't say with certainty that minors should not have the ability to make the decision to take hormones that will affect them for the rest of their life. Will you make a more firm decision on whether or not minors should be involved in these decisions?
Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field. And if confirmed to the position of Assistant Secretary of Health, I would certainly be pleased to come to your office and talk with you and your staff about the standards of care and the complexity of this field.
It takes such a bold stance to just go, I'm not going to answer your question. I'm just going to repeat exactly what I'd said before and pretend like that was something that is acceptable. Wild. All right, that's enough of that. Other big news is Biden. He's doing a review of supply chain. So I just want to read a quick little piece here from the Wall Street Journal. President Biden signed an executive order directing a broad review of supply chains for critical materials from semiconductors to pharmaceuticals and rare earth minerals with the aim of spurring domestic production while strengthening ties with allies. A chip shortage is squeezing automakers in the U.S. and worldwide, and Biden administration officials have been working with industry to free up supplies. Cars use chips for numerous systems, including engine management and assisted driving. So basically, here's what's going on. We now have we're having a conversation about there's some critical things that we need. This took place at the beginning of the coronavirus when we realized that we imported, I think, a lot of our pharmaceuticals from India, or here, we need semiconductors for a whole lot of shit and we're getting them from foreign countries. And the question is, should we be in a situation where we're relying on foreign countries for critical materials? Because if things go bad, that means we're not going to have these critical materials. But now, why do you think we're making these materials in other countries? I'm assuming because the production's cheaper over there. Why is the production cheaper? Probably because the labor rates are different. So is government saying they're going to do away with this law for minimum wage laws that we'll be able to just make the stuff here and we're not going to have to worry about the fact that it's cheaper to manufacture these things and that we're vulnerable to the fact? Or is government going to just print more money and say, hey, we're going to make up the difference so that you guys can do this? Or are they just going to nationalize certain critical industries and go, you know what, free market, we can't let the free market create semiconductors. So from now on, we're nationalizing semiconductors and whatever else is important, which brings us also to our last topic, in which I've got a great guest for you, Matt Wallace, who's an expert in this field. But that conversation has now come up when it comes to the infrastructure for, electricity. For electricity, things went real bad down in Texas. And so now we're having a conversation about whether or not, government needs to get more involved in critical infrastructure to make sure that you've got the electricity that you need. And before we have this conversation, last sponsor, got to plug them, Run Your Mouth Coffee. And you use promo code, I got to check this, I'll put it in the notes. If you guys are picking up some coffee, support Run Your Mouth Coffee because they're supporting the show. They've got great coffee. I drink their bourbon one, absolutely delicious. They've got unique flavors like that, and they're supporting free speech stuff like this. So, as opposed to picking up wherever the hell you get your coffee beans, go to RYM Coffee, pick up some coffee, use promo code RYM. I think that's going to get you 10% off. I should have looked that over before I did this, but I'll put it right in the show notes so that you have that information. And now we've got an actual expert on this topic, Run Your Mouth super fan. He's the only guy who followed the 2020 Summer Porch Tour. Let's welcome Matt to the show. And Matt, how many Porch Tour places are you going to show up to this year once I line them up? You going to be in for the whole tour?
I'll be there for everyone. Absolutely.
I like it. You're OG Run Your Mouth fan, and I leave it to you to build the Shakedown Street scene for Run Your Mouth as we grow the Porch Tour.
For sure. Absolutely. You can count on me.
I don't know. I think we're going to be doing a Boston show. I think we're going to be doing, I definitely hope to go back to both Max's and Tom's because those were hella fun. But I want to push it a little bit further I want to push it further. So we'll see what ends up happening, but I definitely want to do more.
All right, looking forward to see what you have in store.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into what's going on in Texas. I mean, you're first signing on to the episode now, so you don't know what I just spoke about, and I actually haven't done that part of the episode yet. So theoretically, I will have spoken about that. There's a lot of different aspects of the economy where Biden is saying that these are crucial infrastructure, and so we need government to get involved. It's not okay. The free market can't handle it. And because this infrastructure is so crucial, we're going to start making government investments into it. So Texas, which just had an epic fail in its electric grid, and, people, they're not used to cold down there, so they're freaking out. They're freezing. Some people are pointing to what's going on down there and saying this is proof of the failure of some of the green energy policies. And others are saying that it's actually because they opened up the electrical grid, that they actually, I guess, winded down some of the, strict government controls over it. And that's what led to these failures. But you're an actual expert in this field. So I need to tell people a little bit about your background and, in your estimation, what actually went wrong in Texas.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so I used to work for the state regulating utilities in the state of New York. Now I'm in Philadelphia. I'm an engineer, and I work on different ways to incorporate the most amount of solar we possibly can into the grid. I've been named foremost innovator in this field by one of the trade
sexy
magazines, which is pretty cool. That happened last year. But yeah, so, there's a few aspects to that, right? Like we could think about the renewable energy, for example, like the wind power that a lot of articles were writing, very critical of Texas's trend towards deploying a whole bunch of wind. And in fact, there's so much wind now in Texas that at any given time when the wind is blowing really hard, the wind turbines can power half of the load in Texas, which is pretty amazing. But unfortunately, what ends up happening is you can't really rely on things like wind and solar. You have to rely on something that you can control. And so you can add all the wind that you want, and that's great that it can offset, power production during those moments in time. But ultimately, at the end of the day, for a reliable system, you have to have power plants that are reliable. So adding all that renewable energy, it's nice, but I would say unnecessary with regards to the stability of the grid.
So then that brings us to, I think from what I've read, has kind of gone wrong in Texas, and also is what the distortions in the free market kind of are. So like, let's just say you had a total free market for energy. So I guess some people would come around and they'd build these wind things, and they would say, maybe they'd even knock on your door and go, listen, I can deliver your electricity here, and it's actually this green energy. Will you buy energy from me when it's available? And it's going to be a little bit of a premium, but you're making your contribution to the environment. Or maybe it's so good that you're like, listen, you're contracting for when this is available. Fine, great. And then the other person would go, you're still going to need a contract for me, because sometimes that system goes down. And when almost like an insurance policy, like, yeah, go buy your wind energy every day, but you're going to have a contract with me, because otherwise you might be screwed when there's that one storm, right? So what it sounds to me got distorted here is that the government's created some incentives for the green energy people that have kind of priced out the others, so that when you end up in these disaster situations, the primary plants that are more reliable actually aren't there, because they basically priced them out of the market. So like they would be there, they'd be competitive, and then you'd have that reliable thing when, these freak accidents occur. But since they price them out for daily use, then they're not there for when the freak accidents occur. Do someone have that right?
Yeah, I think so. That's a good point. With the incentives that the federal and state governments have provided for green energy, a lot of the investment is going towards green energy resources. But, as we saw during this ice storm, all of that was offline, right? You can rely on the wind or the solar. So at that point, the only thing that would have saved Texas would be more plants that are flexible with the different kinds of fuels that they can use and things like that. That said, those can tend to be more expensive. So really how energy is traded and how investment is driven in power production infrastructure is through these markets. So what used to happen for the better part of 100 years is you have, your regulated utility. So like in New York City, for example, that's Con Edison. And up until, the 1990s, maybe early 2000s, the utilities also owned the power plants. And because the state grants utilities a monopoly franchise over the particular geographical area that they serve, there's no competition. So the state also then sets the rates that they charge because there's no market discovery for rates for the price of energy. And what had happened was the power production fleets end up getting bloated. And there's a lot of plants that are really expensive to run and aren't really efficient, and aren't really nimble, right? Because if, like, let's say the price of natural gas goes down, like we saw, in the 2000s and in 2010s, it would make sense for everybody to switch over to like natural gas power plants. But if you're a regulated utility and all the power plants fall under this regulated regime, you have to ask for government permission to build a new power plant. Whereas now, since the 90s and 2000s, what happened was there was a general policy of deregulation across most of the country, where the utilities were forced to sell all of their power plants because the utilities are regulated. The regulators said, hey, look, we can see that the power production fleet is suboptimal. It's expensive. It's getting more expensive each year. We can see it's not very efficient. This isn't a good way to regulate this. So what we're going to do is the states are all going to set up energy markets, state-sanctioned energy markets. We're going to make the regulated utilities sell all their power plants. And then these independent power producers that buy up the power plants or build new power plants, they participate in these state-sanctioned energy markets. And the way those auctions are built, that's what drives investment decisions into whether or not a company is going to try to build a new power plant or something like that. It's the incentives in that market.
It's still, just based off the fact that what you're describing to me sounds unnecessarily complicated. It sounds like there's probably licensing laws that are getting in the way of innovation, or just pure capitalists coming along and going, hey, I can do blank in Texas and get you guys your energy for cheaper.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Based on my experience in New York, I can tell you it's really hard to build a new power plant. And even though the price of gas has, I don't think collapsed is an exaggeration. The price of gas is really low. It's gone, essentially the drop in the price of natural gas has caused the price of power to be reduced by 50% over the last 10 years or so.
Which, by the way, I think it's important because this doesn't come up necessarily that often. I do think my audience is actually more educated than me on most of these topics. But that's when they're talking fracking. That's where that nat gas is coming from. And so what's so interesting about the nat gas is I guess 10 years ago, we're getting most of our oil and we're buying it from Saudi or whatever. And so oil prices are where they were. And then suddenly we become a major exporter of nat gas. And we've got this, basically we're competing with them and the entire price of energy comes down. Now what's crazy about energy prices coming down is you just got to think I don't know, let's just say theoretically, I make $500 a week. That's my income. It's $500 a week. That's all I make, right? So if my energy bill every month is so $500 a week means I'm making $2,000 a month, right? So let's just keep the math simple. Let's just say my energy bill is $200, right? So 10% of my income is going to energy costs, right? So it's not going to other stuff. But if energy cost comes down, all of a sudden I'm spending $10 a month on energy, right? So now I got another $190 that I can go do something. Now, instead of me as an individual, look at me as being a factory. So if you're a factory, energy costs are going to be a really, big part of the equation in terms of what you actually produce and the investments that you make. And so if all of a sudden the energy cost goes down, so maybe I can afford to buy more steel and I end up producing more goods because the entire thing is cheaper. So it's energy costs coming down unless you're very specifically the guy who just sells energy. That's it. You just sell oil. For everybody else, that should be a springboard for kind of economic development. And so energy costs coming down is good. And so what you were just telling us is essentially the explosion of available natural gas shifted the entire energy market because now other energy producers had competition from nat gas and basically had to drop their prices.
Yes, no, that's exactly it. Yeah. And you see a whole bunch of new, really efficient natural gas power plants being built all around the country. At this point, I think probably 50% of the power generation capacity of the state of Texas is natural gas based, which is amazing. And, while these markets are run by the state, they have done wonders compared to the previously so-called, regulated power plant regime. And now you can see significant drops in the price of energy. Like the price of energy in Texas is among the most competitive in the nation because of that market.
So if just going back to the Texas example, if there were no incentives for green energy, would they have run into this problem?
Yeah, I think so. I think the green energy thing is kind of more of an aside, right? Like I said, a lot of investment went into green energy over the last couple of decades, and at least in terms of this ice storm, that investment sure would have been made better if it was in more reliable infrastructure. Some of the things that really caused the problems here was, first you have the issue of the prices go up, right? And the reason why that happens is because the demand for natural gas, for example, spikes. This happens everywhere, all over the country. It's fairly routine that during summer peak or during winter peak, really cold snaps or really hot heat waves, the price of energy is going to go up by like 100 times or 1,000 times or something like that. It's just the nature of the way the power plant fleet is. But what really compounded the problem is it wasn't just high prices, but then also a lot of the infrastructure. So these are the power plants themselves, as well as the natural gas delivery infrastructure. So like the natural gas wells that are in Texas and the natural gas transmission infrastructure that moves the gas around, for example, to a power plant. Some critical facilities froze up, like literally froze up. Their instruments froze up, their controls froze up. So, for example, the natural gas wells in Texas that would have been pulling gas out of the ground basically in real time to be burned, within, immediately. Some of that infrastructure froze up, which impaired the supply of gas to power plants. In addition to that, you had basically all of the power plants running because of the unprecedented cold. So you have an explosion in demand and at the same time a constraint in supply. And so generally what would happen is under super extreme circumstances where there just simply is not enough power to go around, the utilities will implement what's called rolling blackouts. So essentially that means...
Which, by the way, stated differently, just in economic terms, rolling blackouts is essentially rationing, that because they can't jack up the prices and then let basically people compete for what you want to pay for energy, they go, we're not allowed to, increase the price. We got to ration the product. And so they basically turn off people's electricity. Now, when they do it, is it actually random, or does it actually just go in a straight line, or do rich people still get their energy and poor people don't?
That's actually a bit of a contentious topic. We've seen, kind of political fallout from rolling blackouts in the past, where that exact accusation is made: is, hey, look, how come the poor people don't? They have their power shut off, but the rich people don't, right? There may be some of that. There may not be something to that. I'm not exactly sure. What I do know of it from an engineering aspect is what we'll do is like at a substation, there's maybe four.
There's just some jackass just like flipping switches.
It's actually all automated. There's computers that are all set up that recognize the condition where there isn't enough power. And what they'll do is they'll say, okay, there's the substation here, and one circuit goes to the north, one circuit goes to the south, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to shut off the circuit to the north and just put all those people in the dark for like half an hour or an hour or something like that. And then what we'll do is we'll turn them back on and turn the people to the south off. And then that way the people in the north can warm up, the refrigerators can cool their food back down, heater can warm the home back up. And then, it basically just rotates and people continue to experience these periodic blackouts until the emergency is over.
Right. And I guess it would be nicer just if I guess they could just give you the heads up so that you would know, like, hey, 4 to 5 p.m., not going to have power. Take a nap.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, download my porn beforehand.
Yep. unfortunately, the way these things work is, you know, a lot of times these emergencies aren't really foreseen, and it's spur of the moment decisions where there really isn't time to communicate.
So let's talk about that, because I do think one of the arguments someone who is pro-government would put forward is that we're all really stupid, and so we need people who can make better decisions. And particularly, one of the things I think people are bad at is, let's just say, saving or preparing for disaster situations. Now, I look at government, I say, well, they're doing the worst job at preparing for disaster situations because they're always borrowing for the future to spend right now. So they're really not better than we are in terms of going, hey, there might be a disaster down, like, which is kind of funny about these disaster situations is people are like, well, I thought government's like going to kind of mitigate some of the risk for these things. And then you realize, like, no, they got no plan. There's no savings. There's nothing. But so let's just look at it this way. If there was a free market for energy in Texas, would this have been like prevented? Would there have been economic incentives in place that, you know, maybe some firms would offer you that insurance, or maybe there'd be, you know, businesses that just run around with like generators or whatever the hell would be there, that people would kind of have that backstop and not just feel like, oh, well, government's taking care of it. And then they find out, well, they're not. And like, they're not really that apologetic about it. Or I guess if government's in the business of like somewhat regulating these energy markets, should they actually be, you know, I guess taking more resources from the public and starting to make these investments into disaster scenarios? Because apparently, you know what I mean? Should there be like a national investment in some secondary energy grid that literally just runs coal in the event that, you know, the entire green energy grid goes down?
Yeah, you know, that's a complicated question, because the energy markets, I wouldn't call them free markets, but they're certainly freer, right, than they historically have been. So what we see happening in Texas is essentially a failure of the various markets that are part of this state-sanctioned energy market to procure really, really reliable infrastructure. So essentially, you know, there's different auctions, and it says, hey, look, if you want to sell your power in the state of Texas, you participate in this market, and there's certain requirements that you as a power producer need to meet, right? You need to be able to turn on within so many seconds. You need to be able to react when we ask you to react, things like that. What these markets didn't require was that the power plants need the ability to run during unprecedented colds and during huge ice storms, right? And so because no one was incentivized to build infrastructure that could withstand those freak weather conditions, it wasn't there. And so, you know, in these, you know, 100-year storms or whatever it is, where you have these conditions that really nothing was designed for, you're just gonna have these problems. You know, if there was a freer market,
you can even argue though that in terms of the business investment, there's no reason to making it's almost like if a volcano exploded and people's houses were burning down and we're like, well, why didn't you make sure your house was fireproof for volcanic ash? And it's like, well, there hasn't been a volcano here for 1,000 years. There's no reason why I would have thought that. So is this that much of a freak storm occurrence that like they're really, you know, it's really just not their fault? Like we're not going to beat like nature. That's not happening. We're going to have elements of where nature kicks our ass. And like, that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, like, yeah, the same way, I don't know, people die. It's like crazy fucking shit happens. It's part of like living on this planet, and we're not going to control for everything.
You're absolutely right. I mean, like when a hurricane comes through and blows down every line, that's not much you can do, right? So if you look at, you know, there are a couple of aspects of the market, you know, if they were freer, maybe it would have made a difference. So for example, the price of power is capped at $9,000 a megawatt hour in the state of Texas. If the price of energy would have been allowed to raise a little bit higher, there may have been some additional capacity that could have been brought in. Some really, really expensive power plants could have ran, or, you know, certain lines could have been used or something like that. But, you know, chances are I really don't think that would have made the difference. I think really it's just the nature of, hey, this is a freak ice storm. If you look at historically 10 years ago, there was an ice storm, but it really wasn't even anywhere close to this order of magnitude. Yeah, there were some outages, but not like this. And then so if you were to try to build a system, then no one could afford it. And like you were saying earlier, cheap energy is the backbone of the economy, right? The cheap, like everything, absolutely everything requires energy. And if it's expensive, everything's more expensive. And it's cheaper, everything's more, cheaper. And the system, we try to optimize it, right? We try to make the right investments. It's gonna give you the most bang for the buck. Yet at the same time, it's gonna be affordable. It's gonna be pretty much reliable, but it's not gonna be bulletproof.
All right, 3 more questions. Next one is if you look at you go see the movie The Jungle Book, and what makes Mowgli so powerful is man's got fire. Like, so if you just kind of think of origin of man, like the inventions that got us here, fire's like probably like the first one, pretty great, And so just look at us. It's us against nature. And like, that's the first thing. You go watch this fucking survival show. Someone's got to figure out how to make a fire so that they stay warm, right? That's like kind of the origin of us against. Then, you just look at like in the war of us against nature, electricity is a pretty good tool in terms of that. If it's warm outside, I can use my air conditioner. If it's cold, I can play some heat. Now, you could also envision in your head, if we went to Mars tomorrow, not a very hospitable place, we're going to need a fuck ton of electricity to basically be living indoors. So now if you look at global warming, and let's just say global warming is a real thing, and then let's maybe say that there are patterns to what happens on our planet in terms of weather, and maybe it's not entirely man-driven, or even if it is man-driven, it's in part because we like living indoors and being able to have air conditioner and basically change the weather. That's a man choice, right? That I would rather be indoors, cool when it's hot outside, or warm when it's cold outside. That's kind of a human preference, right? So the backbone by which we can kind of like being on Mars and living on a totally non-hospitable planet would be cheap energy, or basically efficient energy that you can figure out how to have water supplies, maybe even have trees indoors, irrigation, all this stuff. So it's interesting if you start looking at like green energy investments, right? Is that perhaps there could be other risk factors pertaining to weather that we invest in, like the green electricity, which is not as good as having infrastructure such as coal or whatever else, that would actually allow us to beat, crazy weather elements. Like, let's say there was an ice age coming tomorrow, or there was some solar flare problems. There were things that we weren't necessarily predicting right now because we're so concerned. Here's what I'm trying to say. Global warming. So we're concerned that the planet might change on us, right? So what's the tool that we would use? It would be cheaper electricity so that at least we can kind of be indoors and survive. Now, let's say there's another thing that's not global warming that's a problem. Well, then we really better be investing in good energy infrastructure so that if there's some other thing, we'll be able to beat it. So there's like kind of an irony to the green energy investment, and that if we're concerned about the world becoming less hospitable for people, well, then we better be investing in, having a lot of energy available so that we can overcome that challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a really great website, energytalkingpoints.com, and that's hosted by Alex Epstein. He's been on Tom Wood's show and stuff like that. And he has a great quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it here, but basically he says, look, the climate is dangerous, right? It's always been dangerous. And the ability to have energy for heating and cooking and being warm and safe and stuff like that, and having light, that's really important, and that's what makes the difference, right? That if you're just depending on the climate to be okay, you're dead. But if you're able to actually utilize energy efficiently, a lot of energy, then you'll be all right. So I see the arguments that the green energy advocates have, where it's like, look, we believe that having greener energy is going to make the climate safer than it otherwise would be, and therefore we need to invest in those types of resources. However, someone like Alex Epstein would argue, the climate's dangerous, right? It's always going to be dangerous. It's dangerous now. It's going to be dangerous in the future. And if you're just relying on the climate being all right, you're not going to make it. So how about we focus on having abundant, inexpensive energy, and that's what's going to make the difference in terms of whether or not you're going to be safe, whether or not you're going to be warm. And if you look at the billions of people that struggle from not having enough energy, like in India or whatever it is, the advent of cheap electricity that they can use allows them to very quickly essentially multiply their standard of living and the quality of life there. And really the best way to do that is through fossil fuels, someone like Alex Epstein would argue. And indeed, we see that the proliferation of coal and other things like that throughout the third world have drastically improved the quality of life for these people. And, it's not the sole reason, but it's certainly related. If you look at the percentage of people around the world that are in extreme poverty, right, where they're at the brink of starvation, hand-to-mouth type of subsistence, where a reliable low-cost electricity is introduced, their standard of living has gone way up. In fact, we've seen something like a 50% reduction in extreme poverty, or even more, just in the last couple of decades.
All right, and so on that note, because I didn't realize that you were in solar. I knew that you worked on energy grids because you had told me that. And I don't remember. Oh yeah, it came up in regards to. I was saying that California is a heavily regulated market, and no one ever really points fingers at the government to go, you guys are at fault here. There's a lot of deaths and forest fires, and it's because you're not allowing for a free market. Sorry. Okay. I thought for a second I froze on you there. So the question I was going to ask for you, so all the green energy investments, in your opinion, as a guy who I guess is working in solar, which I'm curious to know if is that just a moneymaker, or do you I don't know. Is it all right? Let me come to one focused question. Is all the green energy initiatives getting in the way of us just having an abundance of good energy so that we're kind of well prepared for changes in the climate?
I think that there's something to that point, right? Like if you look at the subsidies, and there's subsidies all around, right? The green folks would argue that there's subsidies for fossil plants. The fossil folks argue that there's subsidies for renewables. But if you look at the rise of renewable energy, it is driven, I would say, primarily by subsidies. And sorry, the question one more time.
Yeah, so I was asking if the subsidies in green energy are actually weakening our ability to have a abundant and good energy infrastructure, that if there was some radical climate event, we'd be better prepared than, us putting resources kind of into wind and solar.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah, so basically, you have, and California is a really good example. I'm glad you brought that up. What happens just for example, in California, is you have the power plants, and they participate in California's energy market, and that's very similar to the energy markets all over the country. And so what happens is in these energy markets, they say, okay, we need this much power in these places at these times. Let's figure out which power plants are going to run, which transmission lines are going to carry that power. We have an algorithm that figures out the most efficient way to do it all, and then that's how we run the system. However, because of certain mandates, right? So you have the subsidies that are essentially fueling the investment in solar in California, and then at the same time you have mandates. Like for example, there's a new building code in California that says every new building has to have solar on its roof or whatever, something like that. And you have mandates that say, hey, look, if a customer is producing solar and they're trying to export that power onto the grid because they're not using it all, utilities have to take it. And not only do they have to take it, but they have to buy it at the subsidized rate. It's called net energy metering rate. And so what that ends up happening, what that ends up causing is, if you look at what happens in the energy market, like during the summer, for example, is you have all of these power plants that have to run in order to reliably provide electricity, because, as of, 5 or 6 p.m., demand is really high. At that point, all of the solar has more completely shut off. And then at that point, you just have to rely on the solar plants on the fossil plants or nuclear plants that are available. However, because of these mandates, in the middle of the day when solar production is really high and demand is actually really low, because, people are at work, they're not at home, they're not, using their stove and whatever. It's just the patterns of usage throughout the state. What happens is there's a glut of power. So essentially all of the power plants that they ramp down their production because solar production is really high. And even though at that point the price of energy is like really, really, really low, all the utilities are forced to pay these subsidized rates for the solar energy that they don't actually need. And in fact, what happens is certain power plants can't turn down. They're just too big. The machines have too much energy.
Just to explain, I think they're forced to buy the excess energy back. So like if you've got a solar panel on the top of your house and it's creating energy, so like usually, like imagine if I came to the market with oranges and no one wants to buy oranges, well, I don't get to sell any oranges. When it comes to electricity, if I throw a solar panel on the top of my roof and I'm not using all of it, the electric grid is actually, I believe, just correct me if I'm wrong, they're actually forced to buy whatever electricity I'm not using. And what you're saying is that there are some cases where they don't just not need that energy. They're creating it's like almost like they have too many oranges. Like they're a fucking orange stand. They literally have no room for your oranges, and they're forced to purchase your oranges at a premium. Like, yeah, that's going to ruin their business.
No, exactly. And what ends up happening is the power plants that are like unable to, reduce their output or whatever, they're putting power into the grid. All of the solar is putting power into the grid. And by law, you're not allowed to touch that solar production. You have to accept it. You have to pay that premium. What ends up happening is the price of energy on that market goes negative. So the power plants actually have to pay because they're not able to stop spinning, because they're going to have to be fully ramped up at 6 p.m., right, to serve the load. So in the middle of the day, they can't just shut off for a couple of hours. So what ends up happening is the price of energy goes negative in the middle of the day because of the glut of solar. And so Californians end up paying people in Oregon and Washington and Nevada to take their
the
power.
energy.
They're literally paying people to take it. Yet at the same time, utilities are forced to pay a premium for the solar energy that's being produced. But
now, I would think that the end result of that is that, okay, I would just think I'm an energy plant, right? And so prior to 6 p.m., I have to spend money on other people's excess energy. And the only reason I'm spending that money is that at 6 p.m., I get to open up my store and I get to actually start serving you energy because you need it. My price is going to be higher now because I've got to offset the fact that I basically had to go buy up. I would just think that would create the overall there is that your average person is probably spending more money on energy. And now here's what's interesting. Poor people or renters are probably the ones that are purchasing that energy, whereas your wealthy people are putting up like these solar things. You're probably extracting more money from poor people on the backs of wealthier people.
You're absolutely right. The effect is really twofold, right? So one is in terms of the cost of the generation fleet, right? So you not only have to have a fossil and nuclear-based generation fleet, but then you also have like a complementary renewable generation fleet. And so you're paying for, essentially double the capacity that you otherwise would. And then on top of that, now you're also paying for the mandates that say, hey, look, solar's sold at a premium. That money's got to come from somewhere. It's going to come from the price of energy, things like that.
All right. So I know I said 3 more questions, but you're opening up more questions. But I think these are my last 2. Is there any possibility, let's just play devil's advocate here, that the investment works? So there wasn't enough of a demand for green energy. Government came in and they actually, spent the money to incentivize people to invest in those things. It achieves economy of scale. And 10 years from now, we end up with efficient green energy that competes with fossil fuels. that would not have existed outside of, government making that those funds available?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think it's only a matter of time before the technology is advanced enough before it really does make sense for you to put on, Elon Musk's new solar roof tiles or whatever it is. Without subsidies, for probably the majority of places where you see solar deployed, it wasn't really worth it. But as technology advances, the price of these, solar production infrastructure continues to go down. And then what's really important is the price of batteries that can be used to stabilize the production of power from these intermittent resources is also going down.
But do you think that it would have happened without, in my opinion, it would, and I think the best chapter on this is Stockman's got a book about all the Obama initiatives in green energy and how it all went to waste and fraud. And there were some companies that were funded through the private market that actually did okay during the same time period. I would guess, and I'll just put forward the argument. It's twofold. One is technology generally gets better. And so if there's really demand for it, I think science is really smart. And so if we got to a point where fossil fuels were really a problem, I think we'd figure it out. I also think if there's so many people that concerned about fucking, the climate, I would think you could sell them, hey, I'm going to sell your energy, but it's totally green efficient, but it's going to cost you 10 cents more. And, let them put their money where their mouth is, that if they're actually that concerned about it, so we don't need government to solve that one. You can spend 10 cents more on your energy. And if you can convince enough of your friends about it, that's problem solved right there. So I just want to really hone down on the question, and you work in the field, absent of the government's investments or incentives, do you think the technology would, I guess the investment would be made and we'd reach the economies of scale? Or do you actually think that it's because, and it's fine if it is, it could be an interesting case study where government did something right. That doesn't necessarily mean that we want them involved in every industry, but you're actually working in the field. Do you see that perhaps the return on investment here is worthwhile, that government created incentives and we reach economies of scale and we end up with a better, more renewable energy source?
Yeah, that's a good question. That book, The Great Deformation by Stockman, is really good. I definitely highly recommend it. I think that's the one you're referring to. I think that these subsidies, have helped drive investment in the solar and energy storage industries and things like that. And in that regard, it's accelerated their advancement in terms of how inexpensive they are, how useful they are, how flexible they are, things like that. I think eventually we would have gotten there, right? I don't think we needed to dump, billions and billions of dollars in pulling all of that demand forward. Because basically right now, in terms of being really useful to the average homeowner, that technology is immature in the sense that it's really expensive to get the really high quality stuff. So what you end up doing is just throwing very simple solar panels up on your roof. They're not augmented by batteries. They don't really contribute to the reliability of the grid. And in fact, in some circumstances can be a destabilizing element. Like, for example, in places like Hawaii, the intermittency of the vast amount of solar that's been deployed there can cause stability problems on the grid, for example. So what I think we would have seen is, if you look at the price of energy from your utility, it goes up every single year. I think really that's mostly because of the nature of it being a government-regulated entity with a monopoly franchise where competition with it is illegal. But with that aside, just looking at the historical price of power from your utility, it goes up every single year. So eventually, these technologies like solar and storage are going to make sense, right? In places like New York City, for example, if you're able to offset just a small percentage of your usage, right? On January 15th at 4 p.m., when you're using the most power you've ever used before because it's really hot, if you're able to just take the edge off of your demand and reduce it by a little bit, you can save a ton of money on your electric bills.
Oh, because that's so interesting, because usually I'm not consuming energy where I see, hey, during this hour it's really expensive. But look at it this, look at it the way that would fuck over the energy companies. If I just had a meter and it told me like, energy's 10x its normal cost right now, I'll go, oh, this is the hour I'm going to run my solar power. And then if enough people do that, well, then the energy cost is going to come down because there's less demand for it. That's really interesting that basically we could be self-reliant just during the periods where, and by the way, I'm sure there's a box that can be created that automates that, where it just tells me when energy hits blank rate, pull it from my grid. When it's below that, pull it from their grid. And then what you can even be doing, I would think the next step would be, let me get my batteries on the top of my house. And when energy is really cheap, let's fill up these batteries, almost like a gas tank, where if, you told me that the gas across the street was 10 cents right now, I fill up my gas tank because I go, holy shit, it's cheaper. So in other words, like if at 3 a.m, the energy prices, and then all of a sudden you would actually end up with a more stable grid with pricing like, across the board, because you wouldn't have those peaks because essentially people are storing their own energy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in many cases, that's already cost effective, right? Like I mentioned batteries, and, there's some problems with batteries in New York City because of the density. They don't want the lithium ion batteries put into buildings because they're hard to put out if there's a fire and stuff like that. But there's other, much simpler, much safer solutions that you can use for energy storage. So like in New York City today, there's a number of, commercial buildings that have, essentially it's an ice making facility on their roof or in their basement or something, where at night when energy is really cheap, they make a giant block of ice. And then at 4 p.m. during a heat wave, instead of running their compressors for cooling in the building, they just divert the flow of coolant from the compressors into the block of ice, and they just melt that block of ice for a few hours to cool the building. And then in that way, they're able to alleviate their demand when the grid is really stressed out, and they save a ton of money. And I think
that's so interesting.
Absolutely. And I think we would see very similar technologies happen at the residential level eventually, right? Where eventually it's going to make sense where, hey, everybody on your block, your demand for energy has gone up over the years as you have more and more electronic devices or electric vehicles or whatever it is. It's to the point now where we're going to have to upgrade the substation. And in a place like New York City, that substation upgrade might cost like $1 billion because you have to buy really expensive land and put really sophisticated equipment in there and stuff like that. So what you could do instead is say, hey, okay, on this block, let's all go halvesies on a battery or something like that can offset our demand during just those few hours a year where we're stressing the grid out to the point where they're going to have to upgrade the substation. And if we can just alleviate that load, we avoid the grid upgrade, we all save a whole bunch of money, and this solution was perfectly economical. And I think we're just going to see more and more of that as these technologies develop.
All right. So last question, and it's because we can't have a full talk about energy and how to make a change there without getting into nuclear. Now, I've mentioned this on the podcast before because I remember years ago just reading a speech about how we basically regulated nuclear out of existence, but yet all of the military's like most advanced and most important vehicles, such as the nuclear submarines, are being run off nuclear technology. So there is compact, safe nuclear technology. And from what I understand, you got to realize, how long ago was the Russian meltdown or even the Japan thing of technology getting better? I've heard that there are, I guess, newer stations that be built that don't even have the capacity for meltdowns. Or I've also heard that, as opposed to needing that one giant nuclear power plant, you can almost have the equivalent of generators where it's I could just be running my house off nuclear. Now, I don't know. This is not a subject I've researched a whole lot, but I've definitely taken interest in the fact that because nuclear is carbon neutral. So if you're really concerned about, that carbon is heating our planet, nuclear might be the best option for combating that. But I am assuming it's just the lobbyists and the industries and who's got power. And I guess maybe the Koch brothers, for as much as people say they do, maybe they don't really have the power. And I don't even understand how much of their money is in nuclear. I just know that those two names kind of go together. But I'll hand it back to you to just give us your opinion as you work in this field to, where could nuclear be if it was allowed to exist? How do they lose that fight? or is this just, internet talking points that aren't, that are not true, and nuclear would not be a good energy, resource for us?
I think that's a really good point. Nuclear is really, really exciting, and the history of it is just fascinating. So if you look at, in the World War II era, when these technologies were being developed, as soon as, we as a society got to the point where we could harness nuclear energy for civilian energy production,
we started killing each other with it right away.
We did. I think that was step one, was let's try to kill each other first, and then let's see if we can use it to make each other better. But essentially what happened is the federal government created the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and they said, hey, look, okay, we, this is going to be a new industry, the civilian production of energy using nuclear fuels. And because we have this demand to make, thousands and thousands of nuclear weapons, we are going to regulate the industry such that the types of power plants that are going to be built and the types of nuclear fuels that they use, the waste products can be given to the military-industrial complex and turned into nuclear weapons. And because it's so important that we have as many nukes as we possibly can, those are the only power plants we're going to allow to be built in the country. And really not a whole lot has changed in terms of the regulatory environment for nuclear power plants in the United States. So you're still using these old designs, and when these new molten salt reactors, which are these tiny nuclear power plants that you could drop in every city or every neighborhood, you could bury them, there's no risk of melting down, all that kind of stuff. You need the federal government to essentially bless the design and allow people to build those types of power plants. Unfortunately, they're not at this point where they're allowing such plants to be built. And then further, through various, we'll just say propaganda, much of society, or many of the people in society, believe that nuclear power is evil and is going to kill everybody. And that's the only talking points that they've heard. So when someone like me or you says, hey, look, there really is safe nuclear technologies that could be cost effective, but government's getting in the way, they would say, hey, look, without government, we have nuclear power plants melting down everywhere, and that's super dangerous and not in my backyard. And so I think it's twofold, right? You need to not only update the regulations, or let's just get rid of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission altogether, but then also, we need to educate people on, hey, look, these fuels really could bring about a future where energy is abundant and is low cost and is, pollution free.
All right, real talk, last question. Within the nuclear, so if I were looking at the nuclear playing field and I go, you know what, I think this is still the best source of energy on our planet, and even if now nobody's willing to touch it, at some point it's going to circle back around and we're going to need it, and you're only going to be it's like ignoring gold in the ground. It's like, we've got the solution here, and for whatever reason nobody wants it now, but that's just going to change at some point. Where do I put my money so that when people decide on nuclear, who's kind of in the front of the tiny reactor thing right now? What would, in your estimation, maybe you're not allowed to answer this, maybe you work in the field, so I don't know, but who do you think is, if you're not allowed to answer it from an investment standpoint, who are just some of the publicly available, in your opinion, leaders of this field that, for the betterment of mankind, you might want to just pay attention to, or you can tell it to us as investment advice? I don't know what your...
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't think that there's a front runner necessarily. I was looking at Department of Energy grants that are out there, and I know that there's at least a couple of, I guess we'll call them a pilot project, where they're experimenting with this new technology under the supervision of the government and with the blessing of the Department of Energy and its grant money. But in terms of a company that's chomping at the bit to start dropping these things in the ground, I don't think there is one.
There you go. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Sometimes people want to throw out their Twitter or ways that other fans can get in touch with them. Other times people want to come on the show and it's audio only, so they don't want it any way that it can get back to them so that they can go about their day jobs and not be concerned about other things that I've said on the show. So I leave that to you, but if you want to throw it away, if not, people come on Summer Porch Tour. If you want to talk summer energy, Matt's going to be out in the parking lot, with his solar things, cooking up burgers or whatever. I don't know, but he's in charge of the Shakedown Street scene. And so you got to show up to one of the live events if you want to hang out with Matt. But I don't know, if you want to throw something out, you can. If not, no worries.
Definitely come out to the live events. Follow me as I follow the Summer Porch Tour this year. I'm really looking forward to that. It's a really good time. You're going to see a bunch of Robbie the Fire fans, a bunch of Part of the Problem fans. A lot of good folks. The one thing that I would plug is my new energy blog, asthemeterturns.net. It's relatively new, this post here with these notes. That's going to be my first post, but I've been doing research on, the history of utility regulation, and I'm going to be putting out a bunch of what I believe is really interesting work on that. I'm going to start by digesting Murray Rothbard's work on this from his book, The Progressive Era, Tom DiLorenzo's essay, The Myth of the Natural Monopoly, which is extremely controversial in my field. And then I'm going to try to build on the shoulders of giants here. So please check out my blog, asthemeterturns.net. And if I could, I'd also like to plug the Mises Caucus. So I am a member of the Libertarian Mises Caucus, Libertarian Party Mises Caucus. I am an organizer in the state of Pennsylvania. And if you have been following that at all, if you're interested in making the Libertarian Party libertarian again, then please go to the Mises Caucus website, misescaucus.com, I believe. Let me just check here. lpmisescaucus.com. And when you go there, there's going to be a form where you can drop in your information, your name and your phone number. If you're interested at all in helping out the Liberty Movement in that way, please sign up, and one of the Mises Caucus state organizers will get back to you right away, and we can tell you how you can help. So please check that out.
I got to talk to Mike Heiss because I'd actually love to do a phone drive type thing. If there's I'd love to either spend a day answering phones or making outbound calls to people in the party. I got to talk to him, but we could probably put together something fun with that. Maybe even just a fundraiser. I'll put on suit suspenders and go 80 stockbroker aggressive and call people up for money. I don't know. I'll talk to him. We'll do something fun. Also, someone in Connecticut just hit me up that they're doing an event at a brewery. It's a drive for you, but maybe I'll let you know if I'm going.
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely go. Let me know.
All right, dude. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invite. Take care.